Okay, so here we go. Analyzing rhetorical strategy. Um, this is a big crossover strategy, and so you'll see this used a ton this year when you're working in a AP English 3. Um, so let me go ahead and tell you what it is that we're doing. On when you're in AP, you get AP multiple choices that talk about rhetorical strategy, but you also have to write. And sometimes the prompt will say something along the lines of, uh, explain why the author chose to use whatever rhetorical strategy. Well, that just merely means that what are the choices that the writer is making in order to introduce and convince his argument to the audience and to get them to agree. So it's whatever strategy you're using. Sometimes it's an appeal to an emotion or to logic or to patriotism. Sometimes it's a short story about his family that is a shared makes a common some sort of a common statement with his audience. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to look back at the first week that you guys did this, and we're going to look on 12 and 16. This was the passage that was about technology taking over the way that we do business and expanding business across, international and national lines that formerly couldn't have been done with a handshake because you had to meet the person face to face. Anyway, starts off the passage in question 12 asks the passage discussion of life in the Soviet Union in the 60s and 70s primarily serves to. So, why did she introduce this story about the Soviet Union in the 60s and 70s to talk about tech? Well, the reason is because the metaphor is used to illustrate why the people in Russia had goods on their shelves that you could not get through traditional means. They had to go through the black market to find specific items, but everybody seemed to have them. And so, basically, illustrating her point that these new tech provide a service in what has long been a gap in the way that we've traditionally done business. So the strategery there, the strategy is to use an anecdote or to use a short story to illustrate that analogy. Okay, 16 asks about counter arguments. Counter arguments are the arguments against her position, and I will have to fix that. But anyway, if you think about it, these are going to be, if you're talking about tech drawbacks, these are going to be the same issues that we face and that we faced in the spring when we're dealing with coronavirus. Okay, sitting at home was pretty good in some ways. I mean, you could do it whenever you could do your classwork whenever you wanted to. You could you could replay something that was recorded. Those were good things. It was the access was in some ways very good, but in other ways it wasn't. I mean, you didn't have a teacher face to face with you explaining a nuance of a question. You didn't have Sometimes you didn't have connectivity. So anyway, basically handling the counter arguments, if you think about it logically, the counter arguments that you would use against the new technology that this person is talking about in the passage are going to be relatively similar to what we saw with that. But that's rhetorical strategy. How to handle the counter arguments. The author notes them and then says, however, gosh, we'll trade a hiccup for being able to sleep until noon every day or whenever it was. I didn't want to go any further than that. All right, last one that I want to talk about with this. Number 23 is from the next passage where the hibernating bears, and asks about the why did the author use these quotes? And the quote was, "Fat is where it's at," and "You bring your own lunch with you," and "They have their last supper in October." So, why did the author use those quotes? This is a scientific article about hibernating polar bears and testing their blood for stuff. So, why the fat is where it's at? Well, if you think about that, why would you bring that up in a sciency article? Well, it's because you want it to be somehow funny or relatable to the reader.